Hey guys, welcome back to Confusing Bits. I'm Corey, and today we're going to talk about Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up by Rand Paul, the senator. And yeah, so too long, didn't read. I made it about halfway, and then I got turned off by this book. Very much gets into the weeds. So this is not a quick synopsis. This is a very thick book. So I will say, tread with caution. This is like a 500-page book. This is very much a he said, she said, this circumstantial evidence, that circumstantial evidence. We're building up conspiracy theory in the very realistic sense. Like we got a bunch of what ifs and stuff like that. So like everything's grasping at straws. So like this is a controversial book. I want to say it's a controversial book. I think it's an important book to read, but don't pick it up lightly. This is not a light read. So anyway, that's about as good as of a quick synopsis as I could give. But stick around if you want to learn more. So let's do one little bird. Rand Paul shines a bright light on Capitol Hill, on the greed, hypocrisy, and pursuit of power and control that costs millions of American lives. Sean Hannity. We just got a bunch of right-wing people. Didn't we even have one left-wing person here? We'll do an MD here. A riveting account of how lapses in oversight, skirting of regulation to carry out gain-of-function experiments could have catalyzed the worst peacetime public health catastrophe in history. Say Bhattacharya, I am butchering that name, MD, PhD, Professor of Health Policy, Stanford University. There's other blurbs here, but this is very much a political book. Don't get this wrong. This is a political book. There are a lot of facts here. It is just loads and loads of citations. Like all this citations. So how big is the book? There's notes. This is nothing but notes. So you see all the book, nothing but notes here. So there's lots of scientists, lots of citations for what it's worth, so you can follow up on your own if you need to. I wanted to get like someone, because I'm not really a white ring person, but Rand Paul is someone I've always seemed to have respected. And when he put out this book and he's talking about COVID, I thought I should at least hear what he had to say. Let's do the barbs here. Senator Rand Paul was on to Anthony Fauci from the start. Wielding previously unimaginable power, the durable medical bureaucrats shut down the nation's stores, restaurants, schools, and churches, as well as scientific dissent. One of the few leaders who dared to challenge us Americans' doctors was Senator Ron Paul. Senator Paul, himself a physician. Deception is an indictment of the catastrophic failures of the public health bureaucracy during the COVID pandemic. Senator Paul shows that the COVID virus has every sign of having been genetically engineered as part of a gain-of-function research. Email evidence confirms that the U.S. officials were aware from day one that signs that pointed to gain-of-function origin of the COVID virus, which they acted to obscure. Government scientists denied a perfectly obvious explanation for the virus, a leak from the lab in Wuhan, China, where a U.S. agency was funding what any reasonable person would call gain-of-function research. Dr. Fauci and his colleagues ruthlessly attack the highly qualified scientists who dispute their preferred narrative. There were powerful incentives to conceal the truth about COVID. The hundreds of millions of dollars of grants and unreported royalties at stake, and the fear that heads would roll, led to massive cover-up of government incompetence and complicity. And it almost worked. As Senator Paul argues, while we may never be certain that the pandemic was a result of lab leak in Wuhan incident. COVID-19 is a stark reminder that funding dangerous bioengineering research in a totalitarian country will always be a bad idea. If nothing is done, we risk a truly cataclysmic pandemic from Mexico. Rand Paul is an energetic opponent of government overreach, has represented Kentucky in the U.S. Senate since 2011. He and his wife, Kelly, who was a co-creator of this book, live in Bowling Green and are parents of 3 sons. So one thing you should know is that Rand Paul is a physician, or was a physician. So he understands this probably more than most politicians. So that also gives another little lends a little bit more credibility. I will say I made it about halfway through this book, and frankly, I wasn't having fun. And I was like, well, I'll switch to something else. I will probably come back and read the rest, but I made it through halfway through the book, and it's one kind of like circumstantial evidence. It seems like it feels a lot of grasping at straws. The straws that maybe unravel some thread somewhere else, but it feels like it's very much a conspiracy. In the real sense of the words, we're talking about a conspiracy. We're not talking about conspiracy theory. We're talking about a conspiracy. How a conspiracy, in the true sense of the word, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people trying to. There was possibly a lab leak in Wuhan. It's plausible, and it explains why it's plausible. It goes through the details, evidence for that maybe being the case. A bunch of, again, little threads that you can kind of pull on, but nothing like there's such a huge argument to try and make, right? Like you have to pull at every single thing, and so we will never really know. That's the thing. I don't think we'll ever really know whether or not it was a lab leak or not, but we do know that they were covering up, that they were blocking investigation, that the administrations were blocking investigations into that possibility, and calling people conspiracy theorists, trying to discredit them for even talking about it, even though some of the early highly prominent people had mentioned it in emails. We have it documented that it's plausible, and then publicly they say something different. So that's all come part of this Senate investigation. And so whether or not that happened or not, there's definitely been this kind of cover up that's been kind of trying to, kind of craft the narrative over COVID. And I get it. I go step back a minute here. I totally get the fear and the irrationality that was at the COVID. We didn't know what was going on. At the time we thought, hey, let's just do masks. We thought, the masks are a big thing. Like, we don't really know if the masks work. It doesn't really hurt to have them. We're like, let's just try the mask. We're just grasping at straws to try and figure out ways that we can kind of tamp down on things. People were scared, and unfortunately, the NIH kind of went overboard. And it was like they had the power, but they were just as scared because they didn't know what the fuck was going on either. So they started instituting all this stuff, and I think it's just a big mess. I don't think I don't know that you could say that at least the initial behavior was that unwarranted, right? Like the mask mandates and then the initial lockdowns and stuff like that. But it eventually did come to a point where we knew that the masks didn't work, and then that was hushed up. And then there come another point where it was the closing schools was causing more harm than good, and that stuff was hushed up. There's a lot of things that got it wasn't it wasn't the mistake. The mistakes were the mask mandates and the lockdown and stuff like that. Those were just mistakes. They weren't right or wrong morally. They were just mistakes. But later, the cover up and the doublespeak and the discrediting people who with dissenting opinions and stuff like that, that was definitely immoral and that was definitely wrong. So that's the thing that I took away from this book, and I didn't feel like I was going to get any more details going through it. Again, I'll probably at one point finish this up, but if you had the smoking gun, whatever, first of all, I would have heard about it, and two, we would have made it halfway through the book, and we still didn't have the absolute damning evidence or whatever. I think the damning evidence is that the NIH is not being is funding research, and it's not being stewards, being proper stewards of funding that research, and some research that shouldn't have got funded, and that there was a cover up to hide it up. I think that's probably the most damning thing that has happened, and that we had this, and this is something that's been going on for some time, is the whole rah science cheerleading, that has kind of going on. Like I'm a former scientist myself, and not a long career. It's only like 2 years, but 2 or 3 years, but technically a scientist. And so like I probably have a little bit more insight than like your regular folks. So I don't want to come across saying that what's the word I'm thinking? I don't want to say that I'm coming across with a ton of authority, but I'm also not your typical layman when it comes to the topic. Just wanted to put that caveat out there. And so I have a sense of like, there's this kind of cheerleading that happens in science where there's this yay science kind of thing, and we just take science as if it's a collection of fact, and it's not. Science is a line of investigation. It's a method for investigation. It's not the fact that Pluto is a planet or not. That's not science. It's not whether or not science is not just a collection of facts. It's like it's you put arguments forward, and then you prove them in experiment. And you either prove or refute them in experiments. That is science, and it's not just people with PhDs. That doesn't make you, just because a PhD said something doesn't mean it's science. And we've kind of gone down that route where we confuse. We want to trust the science, right? Well, the thing is that's completely antithetical to science. You don't trust science. You verify science. You replicate science. Just to recap, the scientific method is you create a hypothesis, you have an idea, you create an experiment to test that idea, and it has to be falsifiable, meaning the experiment has to be either a positive result or a negative result. You need to be able to show that this didn't work and that it did work. You can't have an experiment that can only confirm positive. Sometimes experiments are like that. So you write an experiment that's a falsifiable experiment. You have a falsifiable hypothesis. You make the experiment, and then you publish the results, and other people replicate the results. And that's a critical part, because sometimes you can do an experiment and it works for you, it doesn't work for somebody else. Well, that maybe you're wrong, or you didn't include all the relevant information, and so that's part of the process. And that replication, this is the whole process. It's a continuous cycle. It never stops, and that's why you see, like on the news, when people say eating carrots reduces cholesterol by 20%. Everybody should eat carrots or whatever. And then the next week, we say, carrots raise heart attack rates by 30%. It says this new study. This is why you're doing the flip-flopping, and nobody knows what. what's going on is because we're trusting the science and we're only seeing like the middle of the process. The thing is you have to have the entire context to understand what's going on with any given topic. And it's not, and that's why you see like the back and forth in journalists, because journalists are dumb as hell and media is useless because they don't have time to read through. They don't have the time or expertise to read through every single, just read through the new study and then have the entire, read all of the references so that they can have all the context. And even if they have a scientific writer, well, the scientific writer's got to write an article a week, and they don't have time to do all that. So you get summaries of summaries of summaries of summaries, and then the headlines are completely completely mislead you from what it, like how many people like chocolate increases your libido, or chocolate reduces heart attack. Like, no, chocolate is not healthy, it's stuff like that. And that's the kind of, we can't trust the science, and like it's antithetical to science. So anyway, that's my rant on it. It's like you can't ever turn your brain off. That's what I'm saying. There is no trust the science. There's read, investigate, learn. There's no shortcut. There's like you can't open up a textbook. Textbooks are wrong sometimes. You read them like just because it's in a textbook, just because it's in a book doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's a published scientific paper doesn't mean it's true. Just because it passed peer review doesn't mean it's true. All of that jazz. Like, papers get retracted all the time, and sometimes things are just wrong and they stay wrong until finally all of the old scientists die and the new scientists say, hey, can we stop doing the wrong thing now? And that's when you get a new paradigm. Who was I forget who said it. It was science proceeds one funeral at a time. Like, it's a very traditional, stodgy kind of thing. And like, really, it's only the old, how you get the old guard getting replaced by the new guard is how things get advanced, really, and practically. But anyway, I'm going off on a rant here. I think it's worth the book. It's not a light read. It's not an easy read. It's not a fun read. It's not. This is a book that you've done your duty to read. Let's put it that way. If you don't want to do your duty and read this book, then don't read this book. If that is not your cup of tea, if you're like, I need to read this, it's very important. Like, what is the impact of me reading this book really? On my life, practically zero. So, that's something you got to weigh for yourself. So anyway, I don't know where to put this book. I think it's a very detailed book. As thorough as I would expect such a book to be, and as inconclusive as I would expect it to be. So, but I think it comes from a place of I think I don't think he's playing. I don't think Mr. Rand Paul is trying to be deceptive here. He's not, trying deception. I think he's being forthcoming and honest as he can about this thing, and I think it's and that's commendable in and of itself. Anyway, political books want to kill this channel. Let's see what happens. Anyway, I will catch you. As you can see, the queue is now empty, so next time you will see me, I will be wearing a new shirt, and because we just got done doing a whole batch of books, in case you don't know. Anyway, I will see you guys next time. Toodaloo.